Welcome to the Standout Podcast. My name is Landon, and you are watching, I guess listening now. We're going to be switching over to more of an audio only. This is to accommodate for a lack of accessibility recently in our camera department, and also we are experiencing some Wi-Fi issues. We might bring it back, we might not. It doesn't really matter because you came here for the audio experience. This is a podcast after all. And welcome back. We have Adam and Summer back again, and today we're going to have a new topic. Adam's really excited to go into this one. He worked really hard on this one, and he's ready to go. Y'all got any words before we get into this?
Yes, you far overestimate the work that I put into this. I did not spend long at all doing it.
I guess that means you're an overachiever then. Summer, you got anything to say?
This episode is similarly related to our last episode when we mentioned the whole fame, fortune, money, power. And we actually chose one of those topics to discuss with you guys today. So,
actually, I'm going to butt in here real quick. Hold on. I want to explain this to our viewers real quick, or listeners.
Yeah.
Scripted podcasts are generally well hated among the podcast community, and for good reason. I just want to explain to everybody that when we say script, or if we're talking about what's on our form here, we have a list of like supporting details that might happen. They might show up in the actual podcast, but they're not guaranteed to. It's just general facts, references, citations, and stuff like that. So we make sure we're properly citing all our sources and we are getting the best information for you guys. Without further ado, Adam, would you please take it away and get us into this first topic?
Sure. As Summer mentioned in the last episode, the fame, fortune, money, and power, we're going to discuss today about money and how that relates to Christians, basically how we should use it, how we shouldn't use it, and the dangers that it can present. One of the biggest dangers with money is how it can become an idol. And I'm sure it presents itself in different forms, but it's pretty easy to become obsessed and infatuated with the money that you have, primarily because we need it so much in this world. Yeah, everything costs money these days, and like with inflation, you just need more money to be able to survive. So it's definitely easy to see how money can become so important to us that it becomes an idol. We're cautioned against this in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 10. Says, "He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, or he who loves abundance with increase." This also is vanity. It can, in our modern world, it become very easy to be obsessed with the money that you have and to want more and more of it. And oftentimes we can justify that by saying, well, we need more money to just keep up with the rising inflation and just how expensive things are today. But it really isn't any excuse for becoming obsessed with it. Summer, Landon, any thoughts?
Basically, what you were saying about, inflation's pretty bad nowadays. And you shouldn't use that as an excuse to keep getting more. Or you shouldn't use it as an excuse to be obsessed with money. I mean, yes, you need money to survive, to live in this world, but you shouldn't let it turn into a complete obsession and buying excessively for what you really don't need, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the current state of the world, it's probably pretty easy to put your trust in what you have in your bank account because you worked for it, it's been given to you, and you know it's there. So it could probably be easy to take matters into your own hands and try to use money to solve your problems. I know people who've done this. I know people who try to solve their problems with money, and it doesn't work because ultimately money, it's just another one of those things that will fade away with time. As we see, like with inflation, it starts to become more useless despite having more and more of it. Now, it's as Christians, we need to be good stewards of what we have. Now, the jobs that we have been given, that we're working for our money, it can be easy to lose sight of what God is calling us to do. And what God's calling us to do is to go and make disciples and be good stewards of what we have on earth. Money, it's a major part of that stewardship. We see in the parable of Jesus in Matthew chapter 25, the parable of the talents, the master went off to a far country and trusted his money to 3 of his servants. The 2 that handled their money wisely were rewarded both with an increase of money and with more responsibility and trust from their master. The man who was a poor steward of the money received his master's anger because he did a bad job of stewarding what the master had given. Now, as this plays out in our lives, Jesus and God are the master. They have given us resources to be stewards over. And we can either be a good steward or a bad steward. And a lot of that is in our use of money. So we have to be wise with how we use our money. Another thing, tithing. Big 10% of money that we earn should go to the church. And I know of some people who tithe from basically what they get to take home after paying taxes, groceries, gas, whatever. They tithe 10% of what's left. However, I think it's more wise and rewarding to tithe from the whole of your money, to give God the first 10% and then live off of the 90% that you get to take home.
I can really agree with that. That's a great point.
I'd like to cut in here. That being said about tithing, I don't believe there is actually anywhere in the Bible that says you have to tithe. Now, I have been taught that tithing is important, but it's not. It is recommended. A lot of people do it. It's not unusual, but it is not something that you absolutely have to do. It is just another way to give back to God, essentially. And it just shows that you're putting God first, especially in your money. And it also shows that you are kind of being a good steward and you're using that money in the right ways. But you do not have to tithe. It's not a necessity, basically.
Yeah, for certain. The Bible does tell us that we should give and that we should be generous with our money, but it's also very clear that we have to share tithe in a good attitude. We have to be in a serving and cheerful attitude about our money and our generosity.
So we should be tithing, I guess, willingly, because if you're really being forced to tithe, it's not the same. It's not like you're actually giving it. You're just giving it because you have to, not because you want to. And if you're going to tithe, you probably should be willing to do it in the first place.
Yeah, 2 Corinthians 9:7, God loves a cheerful giver. I do recall that in the New Testament, there were certain obligations toward taking care of the widows and the orphans. And that could be monetary substitution, which is where kind of the tithe came into play and how it originated. It also crosses over from the Old Testament sacrifices as just kind of symbolic and making sure that the people who are staffing the churches are paid and they can survive and have food.
Bringing off of what Summer said about is putting God first, especially in your money. In anything that we do, it's important to put God first, but especially with finances, because it's such a major thing in our lives that if we get it wrong, then we could be set back years. And if we're making stupid decisions with our money, we might never recover. It's always important to put God first and to especially pray about what we do with our money.
It is important to know that money is not everything. So don't think that because you have a lack of money, you are less fortunate. You're just in a different position than other people. It's a different resource, different opportunities to reach different types of people. And you shouldn't tithe out of fear. That's another thing. You should not tithe out of fear. You need to be generous.
Yeah.
It's not about, if I don't tithe, I'm going to go bankrupt in 2 years. No, you're tithing because it's just the right thing to do. You're supporting the gospel.
Exactly. Yeah. Money it's not everything. It's not absolutely the most important thing in our lives. It's just another resource. Money is not just better than other possessions or circumstances because we can get stuff with it. It's another resource that we have, but it's a means to an end. We have to use our money in a way that glorifies God, whether we're poor or rich. We have to glorify God with what we do.
Yeah, I can say as like somebody who does tithe pretty regularly, that it not only makes you feel better, but it makes you care about what actually happens in the church, what your money is going towards, how what God gave you is furthering the deliverance of the gospel to unbelievers. And so you actually begin to care about some of these things. For example, maybe they're hiring a new pastor, maybe they're funding a new project, maybe they're going to be buying something that could be used in the rest of the church. You never know. So you just start to care about different things. And what that does is that overall, as long as you're reflecting it off the Bible and you're fact checking everything, it makes sure that the process of operations in a church goes smoothly, accurately, and biblically.
That's a very good point.
It's also, if you want to draw a comparison to it, in Job, God takes everything away from Job, and he's got nothing, and he makes it through it, and he's got tenfold what he had before.
That being said, just because I just like to throw this out here, when you tithe, I don't think you should expect anything in return for tithing. So like Landon said, Job, after he had everything taken away, because he was still faithful to God, he received tenfold of what he had, more than he had to begin with, all because he was faithful. And you shouldn't tithe because you expect something in return. Like if you tithe just to get something back from it, like especially if it's money or something else, that really shouldn't be the reason why you're tithing. If you're going to tithe, then it should be because you want to give to God without expecting anything in return for yourself. And you might expect things for the church, like Landon said, like maybe the church will use the money to buy new resources, supplies for the church. And that's really what you should kind of be expecting when you tithe. That's what you should be expecting your money to go to, instead of expecting something for yourself personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so all this to say, you don't have to be poor to be a Christian. I know sometimes people mix it up with Jesus and the rich man, where Jesus tells the rich man to sell everything and he can follow him. What he was saying is the rich man had too much pride. He had too much pride in what he had done. He thought that he was better than everybody else, and that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, as in the case of a rich ruler, he was holding on to his money, and it was an idol to him. He wasn't willing to let it go to follow Jesus. He was trusting to what he could see, what he knew he could use. He couldn't trust in God.
That money kind of just got to his head. And yeah, it wasn't because he had a lot of money. It was just because the amount of money he had kind of got to his head. And when you compare it to everybody else, it obviously made him think that he was better than everybody else, which really wasn't true.
Some modern examples of rich Christians who were doing the right thing are John D. Rockefeller. Does that ring a bell? In Rockefeller Square in New York City. He was the richest man in America in the Gilded Age, which was about 1880 to 1900. He is a household name among entrepreneurs, and he was an all-around great guy. He is well remembered as perhaps the most generous Christian benefactor of the 19th century. And he used his platform, his money, his fame, his fortune to further the church, not only investing in his personal church, but in churches around the country. And they are still, in fact, receiving money from his work.
Yeah, it just goes to show that money, it's in any amount, it can be a tool in itself. It's not inherently good or evil, but the people who have that money, they can use that money for good or for evil.
And a way you can see it is this way. You're not a billionaire. You might not be a billionaire. I'm not going to say you're not a billionaire. You might not be a billionaire, but you have a different platform that person may never be able to reach. We'll just do an extremely extreme example. If you're worth $100 billion, you're more likely to be able to talk to somebody like Elon Musk and share the gospel with him than you are to be with, say, some dude at the CVS on the corner who he doesn't care what you're going to say because you don't have a tie to him.
That's true.
Yeah. One verse I'd like to bring up, it's Hebrews 13, verse 5. It says, "Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you." Now, coveting money, it's something that people can fall into at any walk of life. You don't have to be poor to be tempted with coveting. It can happen to a rich person just as easily as it can to a poor person, and possibly rich people might be more susceptible to that due to the money that they do have. But regardless of what stage of life we're in, we have to be content with what we have. The parable of the good stewards, the steward who received 5 talents was not covetous of the steward who had received 10 talents. What God gives to somebody else is not your business. You have to be concerned with yourself, be content with what God has given you, and use those resources to glorify God, to be good stewards of them. What we have on earth is not eternal. Nothing we see around us is eternal. The money that we have, it won't last. It probably won't even last your lifetime. But we have a greater treasure in heaven. We have a treasure that won't fade away, that won't be ruined by inflation and ridiculous taxes. We have a treasure that will last for all eternity. And even greater than that, we have a relationship with God, which far exceeds any joy we could get from any treasure, earthly or heavenly. So we be content with what we have because we have God and we have a relationship with Him. We can love Him, He loves us, and that's far greater than just being rich on earth.
So I'd kind of like to relate about what you just said to this phrase. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard of it, but the phrase, money can buy you happiness, which obviously we know isn't true. But happiness isn't to be confused with joy, which is, they're two different things. And the joy we will experience in heaven is nothing compared to the happiness, I guess you could call it, that we experience here on earth. And while money may buy you some earthly pleasures, that isn't going to last when you compare it to the heavenly joy, I guess, that we'll experience when we're in heaven. So the money can buy you happiness phrase. Do you guys have anything to say on that?
For the sake of the argument, I would like to challenge that. Could you prove to me why money doesn't buy happiness?
Well, the thing is, it can buy you temporary happiness, I guess you can say.
In what way?
Let's say you wanted to buy the latest iPhone. The iPhone 14 just came out. And sure, that's going to make you happy until the next model comes out and you're dissatisfied with the one you have and you just want more. So the happiness you basically bought isn't going to last you forever, unlike the joy that we'll experience in heaven.
Okay, well, what about something like charity?
Charity, basically.
Yeah, let's say you donate to a charitable cause.
Sure, that can
Would that
make
buy
you
you
happy,
happiness?
but it's not essentially buying it. And sure, it might make you happy. You might get joy from, it might please you to give to charity, but that's still probably not even going to last forever. It's because everything we experience here on earth is temporary, especially when it comes to our happiness here.
What about if you were funding a missionary?
I would still say that is temporary because, one, we don't live forever. Two, the
What does that have
missionary,
to do with living forever?
it's temporary, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, no, because the missionary is saving souls.
Well, yes. But I'm
So it's
saying the
not
money,
temporary.
in that way, it's not temporary, no.
So money can buy you happiness.
If you think about it in a different way, it's
Happiness, it's an emotion. Being happy, it's just a different emotion. Joy, it's more of a state of being. Like all emotions, happiness can go away. But if you're living in joy, that's not an emotion. That's a mindset, I guess. That mindset can take you through hard times, whereas the emotion of happiness won't, because that will be replaced by despair, sorrow, anger, whatever.
So, Adam, let me ask you this then. We'll say supporting a missionary, we'll stick with that example. Would that buy you happiness?
I guess so. I don't mean this to be selfish or prideful, but it would make me feel good to know that my money was being used in a way that was glorifying God and possibly saving souls.
Okay.
that being said, yes, you know your money is going to a good cause, but eventually that happiness will probably fade from your memory. Like if you donated to a missionary, let's say, once or twice a month or a year, then you're probably eventually going to forget about it. And since happiness isn't permanent, it's not going to last, I guess you could say.
I actually beg to differ, and I was going with for the sake of the argument earlier, but I do think that when you're supporting something of that cause, you're not just going to forget it. You don't just people. Okay, let me put it this way: people don't just forget stuff. You might forget something small, something inconvenient, something that doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but you're not going to forget where your money's going to if it's that big of a cause.
You would hope so, but
what do you mean by that?
Said you would hope that you would remember where your money is going to, but unfortunately that's not true for everybody. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people out there who give their money or donate money to missionaries and just forget about it. I'm not going to say because they didn't think it was like some sort of inconvenience or minor thing. It's just sometimes people don't tithe because they want to give back to God. Because sometimes tithing or giving, they just do it out of sympathy, I guess, or because they feel like they have to. So it's basically like integrated into their everyday life. There's a missionary. Oh, you know what? I should probably give every time there's a missionary. And it's kind of just something that's a part of the schedule now, I guess you could say.
You're saying if you make it part of your routine.
Yes.
Okay, what about somebody who genuinely cared and they knew exactly where their money was going to?
Then I would say that's fine. I'm just trying to say that not everyone is going to remember exactly where their money is going.
Okay. Adam, do you have any more points for us?
Yes. All right. So I'll ask this question. How does good stewardship of money play out in our lives? Now, I know we've talked about tithing and supporting missionaries and all that, but what about the other 85% of the money? How does a good stewardship of that play out in our lives?
Landon, I know you got something. Do you want me to go first, or?
You go ahead.
All right, but mine's kind of short anyway, but I was just going to say that the other 85% that you don't tithe or give to missionaries or charity, you can, I guess, use that in a way, like, don't make that spending excessive. You shouldn't spend on something that you don't, I guess, need. Like, if you really, really wanted something, but it's not a need, it's a want, then maybe maybe now isn't the best time to buy that, especially if you don't actually have a lot of money and you know you should be spending it on something else. Basically, think of what you need first before moving on to what you want.
Okay, here's how you're going to look at it. Here's how you should look at it. If you're making money, if you are currently making money, read Proverbs. It's going to tell you how to be wise, not how to make more money. It's going to tell you how to be wise. What was the parable of the stewards, right? All the talents. They multiplied them. The good stewards multiplied them. What did the bad one do? The bad one hid it. He was break even. He did nothing. The other guys, they're over there, and they're doing their best their ability, and they're multiplying it. They're investing it. They're using it to make more of itself. It's a resource. It's not an item. It's a resource. You're meant to use it as a tool. So what does that mean? A, don't use it for anything sinful. B, take care of the needs. C, multiply it. And hey, there's proof that this works. I don't know if there's any history buffs out there, but you want to know why the Germans in Nazi Germany hated the Jews so much? Because they cornered the market. They had everything because they had this pounded into them. They knew all this stuff. This is all from the Old Testament, so they knew everything about this. They knew how to multiply their money. They knew how to be wise, how to be good stewards.
Honestly, I was not expecting a history lesson. That is pretty interesting, though. I feel like some people might get confused about it, but it's not a sin to go and increase the money that you have. If it becomes an obsession and an idol to you, then yeah, it is a sin. But as long as you're still going at it with the intent to glorify God and you're getting the money honestly, then it's no sin to increase the money that you have. So we shouldn't be shy about investing and spending and making more money, but we have to make sure we're glorifying God and making sure that we're willing to give it back to Him. Because like when those two servants saw their master coming, they didn't go and hide their money that they made, lie about it. They gave it back to their master, who in turn rewarded them for the work and the wise stewardship of the resources. All right, I will bring up this verse before we close. It's Psalm 16:11. It says, "You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." Now, of course, the psalmist is talking about God. We know this from various passages in the New Testament that God will give life and joy to His followers. Now, relating this to money cannot buy joy. You can't become joyful by spending your money. Now, giving it to a good cause like charity, missionaries, probably can inspire a measure of joy in you. But that's not directly from the money. That's using it in a way that glorifies God. Nowhere in the Bible does God promise happiness. God doesn't promise you the emotion of happiness. Now, that doesn't mean it will be denied to us, because as Christians, we certainly do live, in some regards, a better life than others, primarily the relationship that we have with God. That can inspire happiness, but it's not a promise, a guarantee that God has given to us. Rather, the promise that God has made to us is that we will have joy, and that joy will last us even in our tribulations. Happiness that we get won't last while we're in financial trouble, but the joy that we have will. If we have joy in the Lord, then we will be joyful even in our trials. Any thoughts on that?
No, that's really good.
Yeah, pretty much summed it all up there. Thanks everyone for joining us for this episode, and we hope to see you guys in the next episode. Be sure to watch all the previous episodes if you haven't already, and be sure to keep a lookout for our upcoming episodes. We'll see you guys later.
Hey, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below for the YouTube algorithm. We appreciate it a lot. Thank you guys. Peace.
See ya.